Yes, team. I'll start off with today's agenda. So, firstly, welcome everyone to this event. It's my pleasure. It's great to have you all join this global roundtable event. And be an integral part of this collective thought sharing and learning experience. And I appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. So. My name is Prakar Raj. I am the enterprise consultant at Trademo, and I have with me Mr. Shalabh Singhal, founder and chief executive officer at Trademo. So, hi Shalabh, glad to have you
Hi.
here.
Hi. Thanks, Prakar. Good to meet everyone here.
Yeah. So, yes. So, team and Liz, the reason why we have gathered here today is to learn and firstly share our thoughts with the broader group and learn from each other's experience as to how emerging technologies are playing an important role in making supply chain look more intelligent. I have a slide that I have with me. So I'll take a quick few minutes to set up the agenda for today's session. We'll start off with a brief introduction from everyone, followed by detailed discussion on current burning and concerning supply chain questions, followed by discussing on how to be a global supply chain intelligence leader, and then we'll have 5 minutes reserved for any last comments anyone wants to give before we wrap up today's session. All right, let's start off with quick introduction with your name, your department, your roles and responsibilities, and would also love to hear how recent global supply chain disruptions are impacting your organizations or clients. So it's an open field. Anyone can jump up and start off with the introduction.
Sure, I'll go first. My name is Chris Clegg. I work for the Economist Group, which is the publisher of the Economist magazine. I work for a part of the organization called Economist Impact, and I'm usually sitting in Prakar's chair, moderating, but I also work on consulting and public-facing projects regarding trade and globalization. So I oversee all of the internal and public-facing work that we do on these issues. And obviously, over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, global supply chains have been a large part of that. We just finished Asia Trade Week a little over a month ago. And digitization was a key theme to the 4 days of Asia Trade Week. So that's sort of a brief introduction of what I do.
All right, thank you, Chris.
I'll go next.
Yep.
So my name is Tun Lee, and I own a couple of businesses, and one of them that's most relevant to the whole supply chain matters would be the General Exchange. The General Exchange is a digital fresh produce commodities platform that we are trying to onboard importers and exporters onto the platform in order to allow for trades to happen. Okay, and there's a lot of blockchain and AI technology behind that platform itself, but I'll not go into the details. Incidentally, I'm working with someone who graduated from the Hinrich Foundation, which is supported by Economist Impact. Right, so I think, Chris, you know. So Alex Broom was the one who connected me to this gentleman called TJ, and he was a beneficiary of one of the scholarship of Hinrich Foundation. And we are now discussing how we could do more with this general exchange platform. Now, the key concerns that we have currently with this platform is that, number one, how do we calculate taxes? Okay, and leverage on all the various free trade agreements that the country has, so that our importers and exporters then can use that to their best advantage in order to keep supply costs low. Okay, so that's the main thing that we have, the issues that we're having now. And of course, in addition to making the platform more robust, we are looking at how we could add in dynamic pricing for logistics into the platform as well. And perhaps that is what Trademo or Trademo can actually help us with. Okay, so that is my introduction. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Nungi. Mr. Kayo or Yash, whoever wants to go ahead. Yeah, Mr. Yash.
Yeah, I'll go ahead.
Yeah.
Thanks, Prakhar, and nice to meet you, Shalabh, Chris, Ms. Toon, everyone. So I'm Yash. I'm the Associate Director with Kpmg India, and I'm part of the markets team focused specifically on the telecom, media, and technology sectors. So in my previous experience, I've just joined Kpmg. So in my previous roles, I've worked extensively in curating thought leadership, articles, bringing point of views, research pieces around technology and telecoms, and eventually contributing to the advisory or consulting businesses for the firm. So I've worked with within the market intelligence and insights for the TMT sector at large. And supply chain eventually cuts across many of our thought leadership topics and point of views. So within KPMG, idea is to position KPMG's advisory business in that space. So that's a quick introduction from my end, and I'm happy to hear and contribute to the views here.
Thank you, yeah. Mr. Kayo.
Prakhar, I think he dropped just now. So we have Mr. Prabhakar.
Yeah, Mr. Prabhakar, yeah.
Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to meet you all. I'm down with high viral, so I would speak a little. I'm part of EY, part of supply chain and operations, especially looking at the digital transformation within the supply chain. Been about five years at EY, close to 15 years. Prior to this, I've largely been part of analytics firms. So I am building some analytics product within supply chain at EY. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Prabhakar, and I hope you get well soon.
Thanks.
Yeah. So let's jump on to the core piece of today's session. So I'll start off with what's recently going on in the globe, talking about Russia-Ukraine war, and all these global geopolitical conflicts, trade wars have made trade regulations and sanctions even more dynamic. And would love to hear how your organizations are keeping pace with these ongoing changes. What are your thoughts on this?
I suppose I can start off, and I think following on from a very important point that Toon Lee made, and I think relates to this, but also relates to free trade agreements, is that there is not one single source, or even at the single government level, there are not reliable, easy to navigate sources of information on how firms can how they can use FTAs, how trade wars and Brexit and geopolitical conflicts, which geopolitical conflicts are a little bit separate from trade wars and Brexit. Also, although they do have an impact, but there are no really easy to navigate single sources of information that firms, especially SMEs, this is especially important for SMEs, that they can go to find out the trading environment that they're working in, especially that, if we're going to talk about free trade agreements or we're going to talk about trade wars, how that's affecting the tariffs that they're paying on their goods. There's just no single, it's a very, I think, and maybe Prabhakar can get into this, there's obviously a lot of focus when we're talking about digital transformation in the supply chain on more advanced technologies. But in a lot of instances, I think you find there's some very simple sort of quotidian solutions that would help smooth trade across borders. I can get into some of those later, but that would be my first thought, just sort of following on from what Toon Lee had to say. And just as one final point, I mean, the geopolitical conflicts and the trade wars, there was hope that, especially with the trade wars, with the Biden administration coming in, that those would be toned down at least, but they don't seem to be going away anytime soon. So sources of that information are vitally important, again, especially for SMEs. So I'll stop there and let others chime in here.
So, Chris very rightly put up, completely agree with you. And also when you spoke about navigating through the right source of information and having access to that right quality, I mean, let's go in a technical term, having access to that right quality data. I think most of the organizations, I mean, if I have to speak, let's not consider only supply chain. Generally, people have challenges in accessing good quality data, right? I mean, and running user specific analytics and having intelligence is another piece. But organizations globally struggle with data, and that I think is vital to the success, and having a overall visibility of data is really crucial. Shalabh, would you like to add something?
Yeah, sure. I think Chris made a very valid point. A lot of these challenges are and these changes are these dynamic changes are very overwhelming for the SMEs, and at least we have seen this trend across developed countries, and especially with a lot of developing countries as well. So just to explain this, when we see these importers, exporters, and they have to move goods around the world, they usually depend on customs brokers, their freight forwarders, and many a times they are not working with best of the custom broker agencies or freight forwarders who do not have at their disposal very advanced solutions to deal with tariff changes, countervailing duties, anti-dumping duties. They have a lot of sanctions coming in. A lot of these sanctions and their impact really impact these businesses few years down the line, right? When those cases reopen and they really have to look what went wrong. So, but the change, the pace of change has become even more challenging for all these businesses. And I think some of the data solutions which are very intuitive, at the same time, they do not come at an enterprise cost, and a collective solution which can handhold an SME across the entire cycle of the trade are kind of required in today's time. So yeah, I think I'll completely second with Nico what Chris said.
I'll just make one final point. I don't want to monopolize the conversation here, but when it comes to data and data sharing, I think consistency, comparability, and interoperability are really three key areas when it comes to data.
Yep.
And this will come up. I'm sure someone here will mention blockchain at some point. So I'll leave that for now. But I think, yeah, when it does come to data, there are organizations like the WTO, the International Trade Center, that have made efforts to provide this sort of information. But I think Shalab, you hit on a key word, which is intuitive. They're not very intuitive tools to use.
Yep.
I spend my days looking at tariff and trade data, and I find these websites hard to use. So I can't imagine if you're an SME, right, trying to utilize RCEP or some bilateral FTA, how difficult it is to figure out all of this information that you need. So I'll stop there and let others speak.
Yeah, just to add, but would love to know thoughts of some of the other supply chain trade experts here. What we have seen is a lot of these solutions came part of as global trade content or global trade management. And they are very much positioned towards enterprise businesses coming at sometimes for $100,000 kind of pricing, which obviously makes it completely impractical for SMEs to adopt. And that's where I think the key gap is, where SMEs would want high quality, reliable data, easy to use, to be integrated in their processes, in their accounting systems, and something, so they do not need information on all the trade lanes, all the product categories. They need information around few product categories, few countries they trade with. So how do we really customize it for themselves to use that information in a quick way? And I think that's the key.
Yeah. I think rightly put up, Shalab. So, group, before moving ahead to the next set of concerning questions, I think there are few people who joined later and would love to have, let's say, a brief introduction from you guys. I mean, which organization you belong to, and like an overall introduction about yourself. Can we go ahead with that? People who have missed out on their introduction.
So we have, I think, Zumar, Sanjay, and CK joined us.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Sanjay, we can hear you.
Yeah, hi, this is Sanjay here. I'm from Reliance Jio Infocom, Karnataka, India. I take care of procurement and contracts. Jio is a 4G service provider and very soon 5G service provider for Indian market.
Okay, and Sanjay, as a part of introduction, we also just wanted to quickly know your thoughts on any, like, how these recent supply chain disruptions have been impacting your function or your organization.
Yeah, it has been, in fact, I'll start with the COVID disruption. COVID disruption has led to the huge increase in cost of transport, as well as, and therefore indirectly impacting the cost of the materials and services that we avail of from our vendors. And also the direct impact is on the mild steel as well as aluminum and copper related materials that are required for our network.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
The recent Ukraine war has just aggravated it further on.
I think, Sanjay, yes, you've rightly put up, back-to-back global events have only aggravated and worsened the situation when it comes to cost control. So completely agree with you. Shomer, why don't you go ahead with your introduction?
Thank you. I am Humur Agarwal. I am leading the trade execution, global trade execution for Cargill. Cargill is a commodity trading company with offices across. So we specialize in agricultural commodities at different stages of value addition depending on the commodity. I've been now doing this for almost 2 decades. I mean, I started out as a derivative trader with likes of Glencore and Cargill. I was a non-ferrous metal trader. I was trading copper and zinc across Europe, where Glencore had assets across African continent and NPG and Indonesia and bit of South America as well. Subsequently, I moved on to work as a feed grain trader with Cargill. And so now I've sort of moved into trade execution management. I mean, commodity trading remains pretty primitive. I love to dabble and experiment with technology. And it seems that all the technological changes and technological progression is happening in activities related to trade execution. So that's what I've been doing now. So I have teams managing doing this all the way from Australia to Latin America.
Very interesting.
Yeah, good to hear that, Lumar. Yes. So let me jump ahead with our discussion. So the next burning question that comes to my mind is, we spoke about data visibility and having access to right information, and also spoke about interoperability and things like that. So I mean, how? So this question is for everyone. I mean, it's for everyone. How do people leverage your internal and whatever external data you have for your supplier management, let's say for understanding your, let's say, second degree or third degree supplier, and how does this, I mean, do you use this data in diversifying your in expanding your outreach and things like that? So can you throw some light on this, like anyone? Because I hear this, I mean, my day-to-day activity looks like speaking to global leaders like yourself. I hear it from everyone. Digital transformation is something, is the future, and for that, having access to data. And when you talk about supply chain, yes, having supplier visibility, understanding where your suppliers are sitting, who could be your potential suppliers, which could help in diversifying your business. So, any thoughts on this?
I'll give my 2 cents worth, which is actually not much. This whole thing about SMEs and how they're using data right now, it's still very primitive, I must say. They're still dependent on spreadsheets, WhatsApp or Telegram chats, phone calls. So when we're talking about using external data and managing across the different tiers in the whole supply chain, it takes a lot more time and effort for SMEs that is still on this kind of a very primitive way of doing things. And I hope to see that with digitalization, that the SMEs are going to start collecting real meaningful data using some form of system that could connect the various supply chain stakeholders, for example, suppliers, the customers, and things like that. And then use the data to then say, what is the impact on my business? Okay, at any one point in time, if let's say there's an event going on. Okay, so I would like to personally see that, but I don't think there's a lot of things going on using technology to manage that at this point. So this is just my observation. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think rightly put up. And while speaking, interestingly, I had a conversation with with one of the leaders from an FMCG organization, wherein uh, I got to hear about the multi-tier supply chain visibility as a challenge. An organization getting to know who their second degree supplier is. I mean, firstly, the global organizations struggle with having access to who could they supply from, especially in this period when you have back-to-back, global challenges like the COVID pandemic and, the present state of war. So understanding where your supplier is procuring from, whether the raw materials are procured sustainably and things like that are really very important, and unblocking those, let's say, hidden values, that's the key for an organization. uh, I think we also have Mr. Raina who has joined. Mr. Raina, would love to have an introduction from you and
Oh yeah,
let's see.
am I audible this time?
Yeah, sure. Yes,
Oh
you
yeah,
are.
I
Yeah.
was talking this last time also, but maybe some network issues. Just excuse me for my bad throat, guys.
No
Glad to
worries.
be here. My name is Chan Raina. I'm part of Tata Consultancy Services. I had procurement transformation services here on the strategy and technology side. So good, interesting discussions. Any question for me?
I mean, these are all open-ended questions. Would love to hear your thoughts on, uh, existing supplier. You mentioned that you had the procurement strategy, right, at Tata Consultancy. So while dealing, I mean, how do you have visibility of your supply chain? I'll go very basic. I mean, supply chain visibility is something that global brands are struggling with. So when the term supply chain visibility comes to your mind, what is it? What is it that you think about?
Yeah, I think a very interesting question, very interesting times, and very interesting solutions, and very, very challenging times for practitioners like us. Now, if we see the current scenario where the entire world is reeling around the supply chain management pressures, this has led to a very difficult era from the economy point of view. If we see, we are reeling under pressures of inflation. There is significant challenge in terms of availability of material, both on the inward side as well as to the customer side. Deliveries are not happening the way it should be. Farmers' produce is mostly going waste because they are not able to really export and import the way it should have been, at least during these times. Then, as I heard Sanjay talking about the COVID era putting challenges, and now this Ukraine thing, and then obviously some of the geopolitical situations around the world are putting tremendous pressure on everything. So now, apart from being the practitioners on the technology side, I think there are more challenges when we say rubber hits the road, correct? So where there is scarcity of truckers, there's scarcity of shippers, there is not non-availability of the transporters everywhere. So I think that's an era where we have to look beyond the conventional ways of doing the supply chain management process. So we have to think of creating a visibility much ahead and in much advance when we really plan the whole manufacturing process or the retail process. We have to make sure that we put the infrastructure around the customers in such a way that we are able to deliver in advance, and at the same time try to minimize the inventory carrying cost as well. So this is quite tricky, and I firmly believe that with advancement of technologies and with introduction of technologies like blockchains of the world, artificial intelligence of the world, there is a significant opportunity for all of us to leverage and transform it. The more complex the challenges are, the better solutions we should be able to bring forward.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, we have some research forthcoming that I can't talk about in great detail, but it's about a lot of the issues that were just raised and the elevation of the procurement function in firms across industries. It was often treated as an afterthought, or necessary evil is not the right expression, but it was neglected in a way that is becoming less common. And when we talked to executives and procurement managers, two of the things that they mentioned in terms of digital transformation or new technologies were, fairly simple on its face. So predictive analytics, and tied to that, basic machine learning. So not anything too complicated or advanced, or something that requires an advanced degree in computer science to use. But simple machine learning and predictive analytics would help to solve a lot of these problems along the supply chain and the procurement function.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So there is definitely significant scope for these various types of analytics, including the predictive ones, as well as to assess that what exactly the customer requirements are going to be. So that's when we talk about the retail and CPG set of needs. But when we come to the manufacturing and inbound supply chain management, so there it's a lot of planning, significant scope for having a better planning and forecasting from the manufacturing point of view. Of course, leverage all these technologies and connect the customer to the plant to the vendors, have that seamless connectivity between these open points. That should definitely help a lot. But at the same time, what I was trying to highlight is that how do we connect these technologies with those truckers, with those space providers? When we talk about those people who provide the third-party solutions, who provide the warehouses, who provide those inventory solutions, and so on, while the technology would definitely connect, but it still remains unanswered that when we are not taking care of the human part of human element of those truckers, those employees in the warehouses, the people part of it, then that itself throws a significant challenge in terms of what we are facing today, right? So today my technology will be up and running and everything is connected, but because of COVID situation or Ukraine kind of situation, my people are not able to go and pick the goods there. My say shipment is stuck because of some reasons. There is the Suez Canal kind of situation where all the ships are stuck because there is no space for them to unload and load. So technology has a very minimal role to play, but there is more of a human factor which I think also needs to be taken care of.
Yeah, no, I think very relevant thoughts, Mr. Raina, and just sharing my thoughts on this topic with respect to leveraging internal and external data, and maybe taking a step back with what you mentioned, that the human element is also a challenge. So the way I see it is that over last few decades, our supply chains have been very efficient, and they were not really put to a stress test kind of a scenario, which we all have seen in last 2 to 3 years, where I believe the amount of investment which was required to make these supply chains more resilient was never put, because they were expected to perform and they were performing well. But over time, they grew more intricate with the number of vendors, parties which are involved. Sometimes we have different softwares, technology deployed for different operations, but they don't communicate with each other, right? So I think the first step is kind of identifying that, and I think we all believe that these disruptions are not going to end. there is one today, there might be a completely new set of challenges going forward. So first of all, really building some kind of simulation or stress test environments where we can test if something goes wrong, where all does it impact our supply chains. I think that is first of all critical, because that kind of analysis would bring us to the point where we start making required investments or identifying weak points in our supply chain. And more particularly with respect to this question, with respect to leveraging data in supply chains, recently a trend that we have started seeing is, especially on the enterprise side, they want to go beyond just their immediate supplier, right? So most of the supply chain relationship management, risk management softwares have focused around collecting data, and a lot of times this data was coming from these same supplier about their operations, their financials, performance metrics, and everything. But now a lot of enterprises are realizing that when disruptions happen, they might happen in your tier 2, tier 3 supply chains. For some of the product categories, these supply chains run it to the 10th layer also. So understanding where my suppliers are and what kind of sanctions, financial kind of challenges, or trade war scenarios could impact my nth degree supply chain has also become critical. And I think this is still early days where organizations have adopted some such kind of solutions, but we believe that going forward, supply chain risk management cannot be just focused around your immediate supplier. It has to go to nth layer visibility, and organizations have to work more in a zero trust environment. So you cannot completely depend your supplier to furnish all the data regarding their performance to you. You have to need some external sources of collecting data, and maybe collecting it on a more regular basis rather than collecting that data intelligence on like 3 months, 6 months kind of periodic windows.
If I could just add one thing to that, it's a broader point about supply chains and planning and disruptions. Supply chains, the global multi-tier supply chain model has come under some criticism, some heavy criticism, especially of late. But I would ask people to look back to the beginning of the pandemic and think about, other than some temporary disruptions in the supply of PPE. I'm based in Tokyo. We had the great toilet paper shortage of spring 2021. But other than that, supply chains held up fairly well, right? We're only starting to see the delayed effect now in the form of, one of the speakers mentioned inflation. Of course, that's a problem. And technology can help to solve that. And to go back to what Mr. Reno is saying about the human factor, I think training is a big part of that when it comes to using technology and basic tasks. I mean, if you look at what's happening at, say, Long Beach in the United States, right? Technology can only do so much to solve the bottlenecks there, right? A lot of it comes down to training and finding the workforce to operate the ports and the trucks and things of that nature. So that was another issue that came up in our survey of the procurement function around the world. So I just wanted to echo that human element, and also defend the fact that global supply chains work and are in and of themselves provide resilience. Now, there's always room for improvement, of course, and that's what we're discussing today. But I think we shouldn't forget the fact that they held up surprisingly well.
Yep.
During a time of one of the biggest global pandemics we've seen in 100 years.
So, agreed, Chris.
Interesting.
Yeah, so
On this survey part, maybe if you already touched upon that, I'm sorry I missed that. Can you throw a few more insights on that? If you already done that, maybe I can connect later. But if you have not, maybe if you can give few more highlights on the visibility, human element, and other dimensions of that, that will be great.
Well, unfortunately, I have to apologize. The research hasn't been published yet.
Oh, I
so
see. I see.
I can't preempt it. But if you share your email address, I will make sure you get a copy of the report when it does come out. Everybody on this call it will be free to the public. It'll be on the Economist Impact website. There'll be a number of papers involved and events that you can get involved in. But yeah, I apologize. I can't give too much.
Oh, it's fine, Christopher. I think I really understand that. Why it is interesting because we as a team are also trying to do some similar kind of engagement with few of our customers. We are trying to collect the information and data on this supply chain management deliveries, what have been hits and what have been misses during all these last three years. We are comparing that with past 5 years data, and we are trying to identify the areas where they have been hits, there have been highlights, assign the reasons for that, whether it is we want to ascertain that what is the impact of technology which has been on these highlights or on these hits, and then what is that which has made those misses been there in last 3 years of this pandemic, as well as this current Ukraine imbroglio which is going on now. Now on that, if apart from these human elements, what is that percentage of contribution which gets into it? And if there are certain unknowns where we really do not know that what are the various attributes which have led to those misses, then how do we leverage the new age technologies in order to get into the known space of those unknowns and try to address them? In any sort of this type of data assessment, we have seen that there are 10%, sometimes 15% of causes which we are not really able to attribute to any single outcome or any possible 2 or 3 outputs. It may be in that cause analysis thing what we do, it may be attributed to multiple reasons, correct? So what are those unknowns which could be really targeted with this new age technology and then really address them over the period of time? That is something we are trying to work on, and having this kind of research, if that is already available in the market, that will be great help to such a thing.
Great thoughts exchanged.
I would also like to, share a perspective. We've heard and said a lot about external data, but just to give you an example of what we're facing in a global large corporate like Cargill. So, for example, we buy FOB from one country and then we sell SIF and sell SIF again. So a lot of supply chain visibility at some point of time internally started as a conscious call. How much data did we want to share? But today, if I speak of this internal data flow, one part of Cargill is, so, if we buy in X location FOB and we sell SIF and then we sell SIF, by the time, data finally has to go from the origin to destination, it has changed 3 ERPs, because that's how a global trade execution operation is set up in Cargill. And today, I can tell you that we are really trying to explore and work with technology and technological solutions to sort of, patch up these different ERPs together. So that at least, but we've not really, met up with great success. And the human factor in patching up these data points, even in an internal flow, internal supply chain, has a very huge cost and impact and relevance. So one thing is, that how much supply chain visibility do I want to give to different parts of different stakeholders or different participants of the supply chain? And B, when that decision is taken, what role will technology play and what role will humans play is something, that remains a big question mark even today. So, we've dabbled with a platform called blockchain enabled platform called Covantis, where we are trying to sort of, get all the participants of the supply chain, whether it is a FSQR agency, whether it is a supervising agency, whether it is a insurance company, or custom clearance agency. We're trying to or buyers and sellers. We're trying to sort of get them hooked on to Covantis, so that data is entered. Internal data is entered only once, and depending on how that data is useful to you, whether you're an internal or an external stakeholder in that supply chain, to Cargill in this case, you will get that data automatically without people having to type it again, laboriously, enter it again and again. So these are some real-time challenges that at least we are facing in creating supply chain visibility across different tiers of supply chain that we end up creating. I just wanted to share that.
That's a very relevant example, Jumur. Thanks for sharing this to the group.
Yeah, so really great thoughts shared between the group in the last 30 to 45 minutes. I think we are almost, towards the hour. I'll jump on to this slide, and I'll ask Shalabh to add his views and thoughts on. I just recently read, the Economist had recently put it that the era of predictable unpredictability is not going away. And organizations need to be prepared for this. I know a few of you spoke about being well prepared, having the planning for manufacturing, and these are the kind of planning that is required. So, Shalabh, would you like to add, last points before we actually conclude and wrap up?
Yeah. So, some similar thoughts, Prakhar, as I earlier put, but I think I'm very biased towards that. To design these kind of solution, it would start with deep data analytics and leveraging both the internal and external data, where Jumur actually put a very relevant example that within large organizations also, you are dealing with different kind of ERPs, supply chain management system, transportation management systems, and they do not really integrate or do not really hand over the data very well to each other, right? So how do you really pull together all the data, analyze it? So it will start with, and I think CK also put a very relevant example where you are looking for last few years of data and then trying to identify what were the cause and what were the outcomes and doing that analysis. So to prepare better, I think first of all, we need to realize as organizations that supply chain disruptions will continue in future, right? There is no kind of easing on that particular front. And as the supply chains become more intricate, they can come from anywhere. And that's why understanding the data that you already have, and then maybe trying to map that data with the external data points that can be leveraged to understand each node of your supply chain, whether it is the human element, internal, whether it is your suppliers, vendors, your freight companies, and their dependencies. Also the overall regulatory piece with respect to compliance and sanctions, and how they are impacting all these parties in your supply chains. I think putting them all together on a kind of a platform where you can run simulations or stress test environments is something which I would say enterprises need. Obviously, in terms of preparing for something like this for SMEs, this would be too much. But at least there also they need to start, or we need to build those solutions where they can leverage insights around their particular product categories, their supply chains in a sachet, in a very intuitive way. So these are my thoughts. So it has to start with bringing the data together, building the analytics, and then doing some kind of simulations or stress test on your supply chains.
Yep. Thank you, Shalabh. So before I end up with being a supply chain intelligence leader, what I understood is, especially with large enterprises, it goes without saying, making the system stock is vital to their success, right? So yeah, let me move ahead to this slide. So guys, you know, I'll speak a bit about Trademo and our organization, how we have come on top of being a supply chain intelligence leader. We've been rated very highly by some of the analyst organizations like G2 and Captura. I'll also ask Shalabh to give a brief on Trademo and how we are partnering with some of the global brands in solving some of the real-time challenges that they're facing.
Yeah, so gentlemen, I'll just keep it very brief. So like Trademo was started in the middle of pandemic, and this supply chains and trade has intrigued me for a very long time. And when we look at the supply chains today, I strongly believe that the information asymmetry and the kind of data and information which is available, we all have to collectively make sense of it to prepare our supply chains better for the future. And I see there are a few elements to it. One is obviously more deeper level information around your suppliers, around countries where those suppliers or buyers are located, to understand their network with respect to multi-tier supply chains. The second is the overall trade compliance and the regulation sanctions and how they are emerging across different kind of controls on the export-import side. Now that's a huge amount of data. You need good machine learning NLP solutions to make sense of that data, to collect it, and then basically serve it in a way which can make sense to businesses. And then there is the ESG domain, which has become very relevant. And as we know that a lot of ESG compliance really depends on the supply chains, right? So rather than your immediate function as an organization, what your suppliers or your suppliers are doing, how your transport is being handled with respect to different goods. This is where your ESG compliance depends on. So how are you really collecting the data around ESG? How are you measuring it and how you're reporting it? I think that would matter for a lot of organizations, not just from the compliance perspective, but being a more investor-friendly organization and being able to build a brand which consumers want to associate with in the future. And then the other important piece is the overall logistics and shipment visibility, where we need better forecasting solutions, better predictive solutions on when I can expect my particular shipment to receive, or in my manufacturing factory to my retailer. I think that has become way more critical as I would say, like, this is a world where people expect Amazon kind of experience in everything, right? They expect their good to be delivered to the right minute. So having huge delays and lack of visibility into how your logistics is functioning, I think that's the other piece. So Trademo, as a global supply chain intelligence company, we are building solutions around multi-tier supply chain visibility, around trade sanctions, regulations, ESG, and the overall shipment visibility.
Yeah. Thank you, Shalabh. Folks, we are already on top of the hour. So again, I think I've had multiple roundtables in the past. I think this is the best one in terms of thoughts and views that were shared. I think we really had a good learning experience today. After our discussion today, I'll be sending you the recording of this session, and we'll